The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it bled into the pavement, turning the city into a blurred reflection of gray concrete and flashing brake lights. For Arthur Pendleton, the weather was a little too on the nose. He sat in the driver's seat of his rusted 2012 Honda Civic, the engine idling with a pathetic rhythmic shudder. In the passenger seat sat a cardboard box containing the sum total of his last 4 years, a desk calendar, a half-empty bottle of generic aspirin, a framed, crayon-drawn picture of a smiling stick-figure family, and a formal termination letter. Termination of services. Employee: Arthur J. Pendleton, position, Senior Logistics Coordinator, Vance Global Enterprises. Reason: corporate restructuring, immediate redundancy. Corporate restructuring, Arthur muttered, his forehead resting against the cold steering wheel. It was a polite way of saying he had been thrown to the wolves. Arthur had spent 48 months working 80-hour weeks, keeping the supply chains of billionaire Alistair Vance running like a Swiss watch. He had skipped dinners, missed school plays, and survived on lukewarm coffee, all to prove he was indispensable. But to a man like Alistair Vance, a tech mogul whose net worth fluctuated by tens of millions of dollars while he slept, Arthur wasn't a human being. He was a line item, a row on a spreadsheet that could be deleted with a single keystroke to optimize Q3 margins. The firing had been brutal in its efficiency. No warning, no face-to-face meeting with Vance, just a cold HR representative, a security guard standing by the door, and 20 minutes to clear his desk. "Daddy?" A soft voice from the back seat broke Arthur out of his spiral. He blinked back, the stinging heat in his eyes, and looked in the rearview mirror. His 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, was looking at him, her wide brown eyes filled with the kind of innocent trust that made Arthur's chest ache. She was clutching her faded plush rabbit, Mr. Buns, by its one remaining ear. "Hey, sweet pea," Arthur said, forcing his voice into a cheerful register that felt entirely foreign. "You doing okay back there? Not too cold?" "I'm okay," Chloe said, tilting her head. "Why did we leave the big building early?" "Are we going to the park?" Arthur swallowed the lump in his throat. He had picked her up early from the subsidized company daycare on the first floor, right after security escorted him out. "Not today, bug. Daddy just finished his work early. We're going to have an adventure at home instead. How does mac and cheese sound? With the little hot dog pieces?" "The finest hot dog pieces money can buy," Arthur promised, though a cold dread washed over him as he thought about his bank account. He put the car in drive and pulled out into the downpour. He had exactly $1,432 in savings. Rent on their cramped 2-bedroom apartment was due in 2 weeks, and it was $2,600. Without the corporate healthcare plan, Chloe's asthma medication would cost hundreds out of pocket next month. He was a single dad. There was no safety net, no wealthy relatives to call. Since his wife, Sarah, had passed away 3 years ago after a long battle with illness, it had just been the two of them against the world. And right now, the world was winning. Part 1. The Long Winter. The next 3 months were a masterclass in survival. Arthur's life devolved into a relentless, exhausting routine. He woke up at 4:30 a.m. to send out resumes before Chloe woke up. He applied for everything: senior logistics roles, warehouse management, night shift dispatching, even entry-level data entry. But the job market was a ghost town, and his high level of experience ironically worked against him. "You're overqualified," the automated rejection emails read. "We worry you'd leave the moment a better opportunity arises." By November, the savings were gone. Arthur took a job delivering groceries in the evenings, leaving Chloe with Mrs. Higgins, the elderly neighbor downstairs who smelled like mothballs and peppermint. He hated leaving her. Every time he walked out the door, Chloe would stand by the window, her small face pressed against the glass, waiting for him to return. One evening, Arthur returned home at 11 p.m., his bones aching from carrying crates of organic produce up the steps of wealthy brownstones in the Capitol Hill district. He sat at the kitchen table, the glow of his laptop illuminating a stack of past-due notices. He opened his email, hoping against hope for a response to the interview he'd done the week before. Instead, there was an automated notification from the Vance Global HR portal. Thinking it might be his final withheld PTO payout, he clicked it eagerly. Notice of benefit cessation. Please be advised that your access to the Vance Global Enterprise Extended Health Network has been terminated effective immediately. All active claims, including prescription coverage renewals, are void. Arthur stared at the screen. He felt a sudden, violent surge of rage. He had given that company his life. He had missed his wife's final anniversary dinner because Alistair Vance needed a shipping crisis in Shanghai resolved by morning. And now, they couldn't even leave his daughter's inhaler prescription active through the winter. He slammed the laptop shut, buried his face in his hands, and wept silently in the dark kitchen, terrified of waking the little girl sleeping in the next room. Part 2. The quiet morning, 6 months after the firing. Spring had arrived, but Arthur's prospects hadn't thawed. He was working 2 gig economy jobs just to keep the electricity on. He had lost 15 pounds, his temples were streaked with gray, and the vibrant, confident man he used to be felt like a stranger he had met once in a dream. It was a Tuesday morning. Chloe was sitting at the small kitchen table, carefully coloring a picture of a castle. Arthur was standing at the counter, counting out loose change to see if he had enough for a gallon of milk. "Daddy, look," Chloe suddenly piped up, pointing out the window that faced the street. "A spaceship." Arthur smiled faintly without looking. "We've talked about this, Bug. Those are just city buses. No, Daddy, look. It's shiny." Intrigued by the sheer excitement in her voice, Arthur walked over to the window and looked down into the narrow, pothole-riddled street of their working-class neighborhood. The breath caught in his throat. Creeping down the narrow avenue, looking entirely out of place among the battered sedans and rusted pickup trucks, was a vehicle that defied description. It didn't look like a car. It looked like a kinetic sculpture made of light and dark shadows. It was a Rolls-Royce Noire droptail. The Rolls-Royce Noire estimated value: $32,000 USD. Exterior paint: True Love Chai's Mystery, 150 iterations. Interior woodwork: 1603 hand-aligned wood pieces build. Time: over 4 years of custom. Craftsmanship: Arthur knew what it was because he was a logistics and automotive nerd at heart. He had read about this specific coach-built masterpiece in luxury magazines. It was one of only a handful in existence, valued at over $32 million. The exterior paint was a dark, lustrous crimson that seemed to change color in the sunlight, shifting from the shade of a black rose to a brilliant, burning red. The neighborhood came to a complete standstill. People came out onto their porches. A group of teenagers stopped skateboarding, their mouths hanging open. The massive, shimmering vehicle glided to a halt right in front of Arthur's crumbling apartment building. The engine gave off nothing more than a whisper, a low, powerful hum that vibrated through the floorboards of the apartment. "Who is it, Daddy?" Chloe asked, standing on her tiptoes to peer over the windowsill. "I don't know." "Chloe," Arthur whispered, a sudden, irrational spike of adrenaline hitting his bloodstream. The rear door didn't open because it was a 2-door droptail. Instead, the driver's side door swung open with a heavy mechanical stateliness. A man stepped out. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray 3-piece suit, his hair slicked back, his expression entirely unreadable. It was Harrison Vance, not Alistair Vance, the billionaire who had fired him, but Harrison Vance, Alistair's elder brother, the reclusive co-founder of Vance Global, who had famously stepped away from the company 5 years ago after a bitter public fallout with his brother. Harrison was known to be a brilliant, eccentric recluse who held the majority voting shares of the empire, but refused to set foot in the corporate headquarters. Harrison walked up the cracked concrete steps of the apartment building, his polished leather shoes clicking with absolute certainty. A moment later, the loud, aggressive buzz of the apartment intercom echoed through the small kitchen. Arthur stood frozen. "Daddy?" "The buzzer is making the scary noise," Chloe said, hugging her plush rabbit tightly. Arthur swallowed hard. He walked over to the wall-mounted intercom and pressed the button. "Yes, Arthur Pendleton?" The voice coming through the static was deep, resonant, and carried the effortless authority of someone who owned the zip code they were standing in. "It's Harrison Vance. I believe we have some unfinished business. May I come up?" Arthur looked around his messy, cramped apartment. There were toys on the floor, past due notices on the counter, and the smell of cheap toast in the air. But there was no escaping it. "Third floor," Arthur said. "Door 3B. Part 3. The meeting." When Arthur opened the door, Harrison Vance filled the frame. He was in his late 50s, with piercing gray eyes and a sharp jawline. He didn't look like a corporate shark. He looked like a king who had temporarily stepped down from his throne to inspect the provinces. "Mr. Pendleton," Harrison said, offering a large, manicured hand. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. Arthur shook his hand. The billionaire's grip was firm but not aggressive. Mr. Vance, I have to confess I'm completely blindsided. If this is about my termination package or the non-disclosure agreements, may I come in? Harrison interrupted gently, looking past Arthur into the room. His eyes softened slightly as they landed on Chloe, who was hiding behind her father's leg, peering out cautiously. Right. Of course. Excuse the mess, Arthur said, stepping aside. Harrison walked into the room, his presence instantly making the low ceilings feel even lower. He didn't look at the modest furniture with disdain. Instead, his eyes swept over the neat rows of books, the framed photos of Sarah, and the meticulous cleanliness of the small space despite its age. Hi there, Harrison said, dropping to one knee so he was at eye level with Chloe. Who is your friend? This is Mr. Buns, Chloe whispered, holding out the ragged rabbit. A very distinguished gentleman, Harrison replied with a straight face. He looked up at Arthur. You have a beautiful daughter, Arthur. She looks just like her mother. I remember Sarah from the company galas years ago. She was a remarkable woman. Arthur felt a pang in his chest. You remember Sarah? I remember everything about the people who actually built my company, Harrison said, standing back up and smoothing his suit jacket. Which brings me to why I am here. Harrison reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek black leather folder. He placed it on the kitchen table, right on top of the pile of past-due utility bills. 6 months ago, my brother Alistair engaged in what he called an operational optimization sweep. Harrison began, his tone turning cold and precise. He fired 342 people across the North American logistics and tech divisions. He claimed it would save the company $42 million annually and boost stockholder confidence. I remember, Arthur said quietly. I was one of them. I know, Harrison said. What Alistair failed to realize, because he is a man who understands numbers but fundamentally misunderstands human beings, is that you don't keep a machine running by removing the gears that hold the... Harrison tapped the folder. Within 3 weeks of your departure, the West Coast supply chain began to fracture. Within 2 months, it was in total chaos. The automated routing software Alistair purchased to replace you failed to account for regional weather anomalies, port labor disputes, and fuel spikes. We lost 3 major shipping contracts in the 4th quarter. Total losses to Vance Global? $180 million. Arthur couldn't help the dry, humorless laugh that escaped his lips. I could have told him that would happen. The software doesn't know how to negotiate with port authorities in Oakland when there's a crane strike. You need relationships for that. You need to know the names of the supervisor's kids. Exactly, Harrison smiled, a sharp, satisfied glint in his eyes. Alistair thought you were just an expense. He didn't realize you were the glue holding the entire western seaboard together. When I looked into the data and saw who was responsible for the previous 4 years of flawless operations, your name was at the top of every single report. Harrison pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for Arthur to do the same. Arthur sat, his heart hammering against his ribs. My brother's arrogance has cost our family empire dearly, Harrison said softly. But more importantly, it cost good people their livelihoods. I found out last week that he canceled the extended health benefits for terminated employees. I assume that impacted you? Arthur looked down at his hands, his knuckles white. My daughter has chronic asthma, Mr. Vance. Her medication is $400 a month out of pocket now. I've been working 3 jobs just to keep up. Harrison's expression hardened into stone. For a second, the sheer power of the billionaire's aura was terrifying. Alistair's cruelty is matched only by his stupidity. 2 days ago, the board of directors held an emergency session. Backed by my majority voting shares, we staged a bloodless coup. Alistair has been removed from his position as chief executive officer. Arthur's eyes went wide. You ousted your own brother? I protected my father's legacy, Harrison corrected firmly. And I intend to fix the damage. Starting today, Part 4. The offer. Harrison opened the black leather folder. Inside were several crisp documents bearing the official gold seal of the Vance Family Trust. I am taking over as active chairman, Harrison said. But I have no interest in managing the day-to-day operations of the logistics infrastructure. I need someone who possesses absolute operational brilliance, unquestionable integrity, and a reason to care about the people on the ground. He pushed the top document across the table toward Arthur. Executive Employment Agreement Position. Chief Operating Officer, COO of Global Logistics. Vance Enterprises base salary, $2,500,000 USD, annum sign-on. Bonus, 5,000 USD immediate disbursement. Equity stake, 1.5% corporate shares vested over 3 years. Arthur stared at the numbers. The zeros seemed to swim on the page. His brain, usually so sharp and analytical, completely locked up. $2.5 million? Arthur whispered, his voice cracking. Mr. Vance, I was making $95,000 when I was fired. And you were being criminally underpaid and exploited, Harrison said flatly. The sign-on bonus is already authorized. It will clear your accounts within the hour if you sign. Furthermore, the contract includes an ironclad clause. Full, lifetime comprehensive medical coverage for you and Chloe, guaranteed by the Vance Family Trust. Independent of your employment status. Arthur looked from the paper to Harrison, then over to Chloe, who had gone back to coloring her castle, blissfully unaware that her father's entire universe was shifting on its axis. Why the grandeur? Arthur asked, gesturing out the window toward the multi-million-dollar Rolls-Royce parked in the street. Why come here yourself? You could have sent a lawyer. You could have sent an email. Harrison stood up and walked over to the window, looking down at the magnificent machine resting in the gray neighborhood. Because, Arthur, when you humiliate a man, you do it in the dark. Through human resources and security guards. My brother is a coward. But when you honor a man, you do it in the daylight, in front of the whole world. Harrison turned back to face him, his eyes filled with a deep, profound sincerity. I wanted your neighbors to see it. I wanted the people who watched you struggle to see the exact moment your life changed. And frankly, I wanted to drive the car. It's a beautiful morning for a ride, don't you think? Arthur took the heavy gold pen Harrison offered. His hand trembled slightly as he placed his signature on the bottom line of the contract. The moment the ink dried, Harrison smiled warmly and reached into his pocket, pulling out a set of heavy, bespoke keys attached to a leather fob embossed with the Rolls-Royce spirit of ecstasy. He placed them in Arthur's hand. What's this? Arthur asked, stunned. A gesture of goodwill, Harrison said. The drop tail belongs to the corporate fleet now. Consider it your company car. I took the liberty of having a top-of-the-line child safety seat installed in the passenger side this morning. Arthur stood up, the sheer weight of the moment finally hitting him. The exhaustion of the last 6 months, the fear, the sleepless nights, the terror of the upcoming rent deadline, it all evaporated, replaced by a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. Thank you, Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means for us. I think I do, Harrison said softly, giving Arthur a firm pat on the shoulder. Your driver is downstairs to take you to the corporate headquarters to meet your new team. I suggest you pack up your things. You won't be living here much longer. 10 minutes later, Arthur and Chloe walked down the front steps of the apartment building. The rain had stopped, and the sun was breaking through the Seattle clouds, catching the deep crimson paint of the Rolls-Royce and making it blaze like a ruby. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as the driver opened the door. Arthur lifted Chloe into the custom leather car seat, buckling her in safely. She clutched Mr. Buns, her eyes wide with delight as she looked at the starlit LED headliner inside the vehicle. Arthur took a deep breath, looking back at the dingy apartment building one last time. He wasn't the broken man who had left Vance Global 6 months ago. He was a father who had protected his daughter through the storm, and today the sun had finally come out. He stepped into the car, the heavy door closing with a solid, luxurious thud, shutting out the noise of the world outside as they glided smoothly into a brand new life.